Kicking off our list at number 10, the Pioneer's Defense. Right off the bat, yeah, look at this one. I don't have to explain why it's creepy in any way. A whole town appears to be wearing gas masks. Yeah, you could probably guess which era this is. This image was captured in 1937 by Russian photographer Viktor Bula. Adapting to new safety regulations these last few years have been challenging, no doubt about that. But in 1937, if you wanted to join the Young Pioneers, which is the Soviet version of the Boy Scouts, well, you had to wear these huge gas masks and part of military preparation. Yeah, welcome to Boy Scouts. Grab a button and then put this vacuum cleaner on your face. Enjoy. Break a leg. It's gonna hurt your back a bit. This photo is haunting. It's from the Leningrad area and it happened while dictator Stalin was still in charge. These masks are so haunting to look at. We see them after the fact, but to see them being worn in real time in that photo, I don't know. Maybe this photo gets me because we can't see anybody's faces or ages. Right? Makes you paint the picture yourself. Either way, let's move on to some clown stuff, shall we? Number 9, 1910 clowns. Yeah, they existed back then, and they were much worse. Here's a fun fact, I didn't know this, but back in 2016, a study was done, and it turns out Americans fear clowns more than they fear death. Mind you, this was at the height of the clown craze back in America, but a poll was conducted by the Morning Consult in 2016 and it shows that 42% of Americans said they were in some capacity afraid of clowns. 42%. So if this is you, you may want to skip to the next one. I'll beat you there, no problem. This photo is from 1910 and it appears to be a jolly good time, right? 2 clowns for the price of 1. Nice, what a great deal. Let's go. Now what's terrifying about this photo, I'll admit, is that the clown on the right is much larger than the clown on the left. If you have a fear of giants, well, you're screwed here, really. Nowhere you can go. Just a tall clown and a little clown. There's clowns everywhere. I don't like clowns. Number 8, Annalise Michel. If you've seen or heard of the 2005 horror film, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, this one here should ring a bell. This is the OG photo. How scary is that? Annalise Michel was a devout Catholic living a normal life with her parents in Germany. This was back in the late 1960s, but seemingly out of nowhere, she began to black out before showing strange behaviors. And when I say strange behaviors, I mean she would hallucinate and eat spiders. Stuff like that. Yeah, it was pretty scary. It was also extremely unhealthy, but ultimately Annalise claimed to be possessed by the devil, and her parents soon had to agree. Cut to 67 exorcisms later, Annalise sadly died of malnutrition at age 23 in 1976. And like I mentioned at the start of this point, her story was so widely known and shocking that it eventually inspired the 2005 horror film, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which I have seen, and it is very scary. All real. Turns out. Sleep in fear. Number 7, the fire. This is a photo that comes to us from 2003. Not quite vintage, but still old enough. I'm 28. Yeah, where's time going? I don't know. This one came from the Station nightclub back in Rhode Island, and it shows the band Great White as they perform. Now, while this may seem like just a regular photo that somebody took on their Motorola Razr, what ensued shortly after this photo was taken is absolutely horrifying and tragic. Basically, as the band performed, there were some pyrotechnics that were set off, and they were meant to be a spectacular display, but they only ended up coming out as a disaster. See, the fireworks ended up setting all of the flammable acoustic foam in the walls and the ceiling all around them on fire. And it happened fast too, within 1 minute. Everything that was combustible ended up going in flames fast. Within 2 minutes, the entire club was fully engulfed in black smoke and people were having trouble finding exits. It was crowded, right? In the end, this fire took the lives of 100 people and another 230 were injured as a result. It has since gone down in US history as one of the worst and most deadly nightclub fires. Yeah, we look at Ball of Burning Men and think of what happened there. This is basically a 2003 version of that. More people, more flammable stuff, more pyrotechnics, and unfortunately, more deaths. Number 6, the Titanic. We all know the story of the Titanic. I mean, Olivia hasn't seen the movie, but we'll get to that later. It's one of the most famous in history, and this photo comes from just before that historic iceberg encounter. On April 10th, 1912, the Titanic set sail on its maiden voyage, heading from Southampton over to New York City. Now, the ship took a couple stops along the way, one in France and the other in Ireland, before setting off ultimately for the United States officially. Now, somewhere along the beginning part of its journey, somebody was able to snap a photo of the ship as it sailed away. Now, it's not clear exactly where this photo was taken because it's old and there's a lot of water, but it is thought to be the last photo of the ship ever before its tragic end. Considering it was only 4 days after the ship set sail that it hit the iceberg, it is likely that this photo came not too long before that terrible day. So yeah, they're probably right. This was probably the last photo. Number 5, Oroville Dam. On February 13th, 2017 in Oroville, California, the Oroville Dam, which is the tallest dam in the United States that holds back a reservoir that contains 1.1 trillion gallons of water, well, that dam's main emergency spillways were damaged. This led to the emergency evacuation of 188,000 people over concerns that the damage's emergency spillway might just fail at this point. This was all caused by torrential rain and floods in the region, which then began to reveal the extensive damage in said spillway. This photo here shows the dam releasing 100,000 cubic feet of water per second into the main spillway. This is a feat of engineering, if anything. Now, luckily, a major disaster was avoided in the situation because of quick action by those responsible, but to see it unfold and to see how fierce it is, I don't like water, or pressure, or dams, or history. Let's move on. Number 4, the lipstick killer. This is a photo that comes to us from December 10th, 1945. Now, if looking at this image gives you a weird shudder or chill down your spine, you got instincts. Nice. You've heard about this in some way, or yeah, you read the title. You know it's some bad stuff coming. This was written by a terrible person known as the lipstick killer. This photo is an image of a note that he left written on the wall at one of his crime scenes. Now, the photo comes from the apartment of Frances Brown, as just before he wrote this message, he, as you would have guessed, took her life, sadly. After this message was left, he ended up taking the life of another person because he was finally caught by police 6 months later. The message, put in the photo, reads, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." Yeah, the lipstick killer wrote that. It's the scariest thing I ever heard. It's an absolute chilling note with a horrifying backstory. A lot of killers are getting their Netflix specials now, so I'm sure it's only time before he gets one. Number 3, eruption of Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens is a stratovolcano located in Washington. Now, the volcano is best known, of course, for its huge and disastrous eruption on May 18th, 1980. And we have a photograph of it, and it's very scary. This photograph comes from photographer Robert Landsberg, who of course was unfortunately in the area at the time of the eruption. Now, before the eruption, he had visited the area in order to photograph and document all the changes that were happening. Didn't expect this one. On May 18th, he was within a few miles of the volcano when it did erupt. Now, since he unfortunately was located so close to the eruption, he knew he wouldn't be able to escape this disaster. So instead of focusing on the impossible, he focused on taking as many photos as possible. Just like a historian at the end of his life, really. Robert was obviously incredibly brave and dedicated, and also very smart. After snapping as many photos as he could, including this one, he then secured his camera in his backpack and covered his backpack with his body. Protected history. It's like he knew he was unlikely to survive, but he still wanted to make sure that these photos did. That's why it was so important for me to bring it in this list today. His body was found 17 days later with his backpack still underneath him. Plan did work, and his film was of course developed and has provided geologists with some really valuable insights with his close documentation of the eruption. So historically, it's a feat, but also scientifically, it's one as well. Number 2, acid drum. This photo comes to us from the inside of the house of, well, you guessed it, another terrible person. The serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah, we all know him. This photo was taken from the inside of his home right after he was found and caught by authorities. Now, before his arrest, he was sadly able to take the lives of 17 individuals. Now, although this photo may look kind of plain, dare I say, the horrors behind it are plentiful. This shot is simple. It shows a drum full of acid that was located inside of his home. You can only imagine the horrors. I don't need to tell you what this was used for, obviously. And I can't imagine the horrors that investigators saw when they first arrived to his house. Even investigating the crimes is one thing, but to show up and see this, it's too much. Thankfully, Jeffrey was caught, and in 1992, he was sentenced to life in prison, but just 2 years later, he was killed by a fellow prison inmate. Insert Curb Your Enthusiasm music. And finally, number 1, Europe flood. This photo comes to us from the summer of 2022, as people across Western Europe experienced disastrous flooding. Now, after days of heavy raining, it ended up turning rivers that were usually normal and calm into these raging currents that ravaged the streets, and sadly left cars and power lines just being swept away. Homes too, they got engulfed and residents were trapped inside. This photo was taken in Erstadt, which is just southwest of Cologne, and it shows how a bunch of houses collapsed due to subsidence, which is the sun sinking of the ground surface below. Now, unfortunately, these floods caused many people to lose their lives, mostly in Germany, but these were sadly dozens of people in Belgium as well, pretty much everywhere. Bigger than we thought initially, all of which was an absolute tragedy. Rescue workers worked tirelessly to help as many people as possible escape this terrible situation. I couldn't even imagine responding to this, let alone being caught up in it. That's terrible. Number 10, Russian Bigfoot caught on tape. The exact location of where this video was taken is still unknown. In fact, there isn't a ton known about this video at all, but what is known is that it was taken somewhere in Russia. That's about it. And people actually believe that it captures the real Bigfoot, or one of the many Bigfoots out there. This is the Russian one. They got a Russian Bigfoot. What do we all think here? I wanted to start with one of the most insane videos I could find. I think I nailed it. How'd I do? I don't know. This one comment dives in further. The user says, the title of the original video was called Chichuna, but in Russian script. The creature hops, sometimes sideways like a lemur. Of course, lemurs have tails, which make that type of movement easier. And chichunas are sometimes described as having tails, but this creature doesn't appear to have one, does it? No, it looks like a blob of scariness. I don't even know. The original footage was in all Russian and claimed to have been shot in Siberia. It also featured a boy and a dog in the foreground who didn't appear to be all that concerned, but I still believe this footage to be genuine. That's one of the top comments, so you know someone did their research. Number 9, overnight visitor. Oh, this one definitely gives me the chills. I don't like it. This video was taken from a surveillance camera that was placed inside of a couple's home. Not outside, inside. This is scary, and I hope this never happens to anybody watching this video. The footage caught something while they were both asleep, and it's one of the creepiest things that I've ever seen. When the couple woke up the next day, they were unable to find a purse that they knew was in the home right before they went to sleep. So they decided to check their security cameras, and this is what they found. As they were sleeping, a man crept in and was so quiet that he didn't wake them or their dogs up. No, he stood at the top of the stairs watching them sleep for a few minutes, which just adds another layer of ew to this whole scenario. Yeah, always check those nooks and crannies before you go to sleep, I guess. Number 8, Titanic inspection card. This inspection card once belonged to a woman named Marion Meanwell. What could possibly be creepy about an inspection card, you ask? Well, it shows how Marion was not intended to be on the Titanic, but by some turn of events, she unfortunately found herself as one of the passengers that went down with the ship. Now, the card shows that she was originally meant to be traveling on a ship called the Majestic. For some reason, the trip she originally had planned was delayed, and she instead was assigned to the ill-fated Titanic. Yeah, you can see the word Majestic is literally crossed out of her card. You know, adds to the creepy element because it shows her literal change in plans. Number 7, Norway Lights. Natural light phenomena is common in our big, beautiful planet. The northern lights, the green flash, solar eclipses, you name it. I bet those were all pretty alarming back in ancient times. Now, some of these natural events look otherworldly. They look cosmic almost. Most of the time, there's an explanation waiting, but for the mysterious glowing orbs floating over Norway, the Havsdalen lights, as locals call them, we still need some answers. Scientists have been trying to gather research, and in 2014, after many impressive light shows, their best guess is a natural battery that charges underground and then emits this light show above. Maybe this has something to do with the reoccurring lights over Phoenix. Could be the same phenomena happening, who knows? Number 6, the cool time traveler. Do you believe in time travel? If your answer is no, maybe this next one, maybe it'll change your mind or keep you open to the concept. It's a common theme in movies, Back to the Future, Loopers, Avengers. Time travel plots are fun, but they're absolute nonsense. Or are they? When we see a case like the Cape Scott story, we can't help but be intrigued a little bit. Time travel or not, this is an interesting photo. It comes from Ray Peterson's book, The Great Cape Scott Story. That book was from 1974, but the actual photo used in the book was taken over 100 years ago. And in the photo, it shows this modern-looking guy, rocking shorts, maybe jorts, who knows? He has messy morning surfer hair, dippity-doo, three-hold, you know, that kind of stuff. He doesn't look like he's from that time period at all. This also has happened more than once, like the time-traveling hipster. I don't know, I'm pretty sure it's my cousin. That looks like a guy I know. Definitely not a guy from the 1900s, that's for sure. Number 5, skunk ape. This one is exactly what it sounds like. The skunk ape was seen back in 2000, so hopefully, if it's a real thing, it's long gone. Hopefully it's dead by now. It's pretty gross. 2 photos were taken of the supposed skunk ape, and this thing looks like Bigfoot's cooler, older cousin, you know? That cousin who has a lava lamp, does kickflips in the garage in October. That kind of cousin, that's the skunk ape, really. An anonymous source sent the Sarasota County Sheriff's Department these photos. They mailed them in, which for starters, that's pretty jarring to receive. Just a creature, just Bigfoot, put it in the mail. But she claims these photos were taken in her actual backyard and that this creature was not a black bear. It wasn't anything we've seen before. I personally don't think that's a black bear. If anything, it's just a really large, odd looking dog. Those teeth alone are a red flag either way. I want nothing to do with that. Number 4, Solway spaceman caught on photo. Look, we've all been photobombed before. It's a blessing in disguise. You look back at prom photos, some dude sneezing in the background while you're, you know, having the moment of your life. It's the best, we love it. But when Jim Templeton took a photo of his daughter in an otherwise empty marsh, long before Photoshop existed, it appears an astronaut just crashed the family moment. He just had to pop up in the photo in the background. Now Jim assures us that nobody was around, which I believe, otherwise what a weird photo to take in an empty field. I'd be like, hi, get away from my daughter. Just, yeah, 17 meters to the left, thanks. Also, the fact that this man looks like he's from space. Yeah, that makes it more believable, no? What are we looking at right now? Who is this? It's so creepy. Kodak even got involved in this story, right? Like Kodak, the company Kodak. They confirmed this photo was not tampered with. And they know everything. They made Avatar, so they know what's up. Let's run everything by Kodak from now on. Deal? Number 3, Worstead Church visitor. Okay, time to get a little paranormal. We love those. Hit the lights. Back in 1975, Peter and Diane Berthelot were visiting the Worstead Church in the UK. It was beautiful, right? So like any visitor does, Peter took a photo with his nice Kodak camera, right? He wants to see the truth with his Kodak. Peter took a photo of his lovely wife sitting in the spectacle of a church, but later on, once the photo was developed, somebody else was all of a sudden in the photo now. Or something, we don't really know. Right on the bench behind Diane, there appears to be a person in all white. How calming is that? Maybe it's a wedding, maybe it's their big day. We love it. When the couple went back to the church to ask about who it was, a local suggested they may have gotten photo proof of the white lady, the spirit of a healer who haunts the church. I mean, as far as surprise ghosts go, that's pretty tame. That's a pretty tame encounter. That's how it should be. Could have been a lot worse. They're like, oh, that's the demon. That's Daryl the demon. Yeah, you don't want any part of that. Number 2, Black Knight satellite. Not to be confused with Martin Lawrence's Black Knight. That's, although that's pretty historical and memorable in itself. The Black Knight satellite is something that has been orbiting our planet for God knows how long. We're guessing thousands of years. Everything else on this list is quite recent, but this myth is ancient. This photo here you've probably seen at one point or another. It was taken back in 1998 during an American mission to the International Space Station. Apparently this guy has been hovering over our Earth just watching us. It's some sort of alien satellite. That's a fun theory, no doubt about it. But during a spacewalk in 1998, one of the thermal covers came loose and drifted away from the station. Could this be that cover that just floated off and wrapped itself around a rock or something? Or it could be an ancient night satellite. One of the two. And finally, number 1, the doorbell licker. Nice, we gotta end with the weirdest thing I've ever seen. This one's short and sweet. Not much explaining to do here, obviously. Does what it says in the can. Back in 2019, a man was caught on surveillance, a doorbell camera, approaching a home in a neighborhood in Salinas, California. He doesn't say much, he just shows up, doesn't drop off any package, nothing like that. He just shows up and starts licking the doorbell. Not the camera, but the actual doorbell, like the button. He must have rang the bell hundreds of times because he did this for 3 hours straight. His jaw muscles must be insane. The homeowner said in a following interview after seeing said footage, I quote, "Oh boy, that is just weird." Yeah, that's what they said to that footage for 3 hours of a man licking their doorbell. They're like, oh boy, that's weird. That was me, I'd move. I'd be halfway packing. I'd be like, oh boy, that's weird. Grab a box, let's go. We're moving. Number 10, the cube. All right, Transformers fans, let's do this. I feel like we're hearing more about these things like UFOs or UAPs, whatever you want to call them now. I feel like we're hearing about them now more than ever. So why not kick this weird list off with something off-world? We have to include some alien cover-ups, right? It's me, it's Taylor, why not? I figured that I'd find one that's also not too well known. We haven't seen this one, on YouTube all the time. Not too long ago, this spinning cube-looking craft or drone or something, it was spotted over Missouri, just lurking in the same spot, just hovering, and then it would zoom off. Folks could see it with their naked eye on the ground. It was also pretty obvious. It was eye-grabbing, it was shiny in the sky. Only a couple hours later, it was seen again, but this time it was 700 miles away. This time it was 44-year-old Matthew Jandeka, and he was minding his own business, hanging out on the porch, just doing his, Sunday stuff, when this cube, again, this floaty cube, caught his attention. It was a sunny day, the light reflecting off the cube caught his eye, but then a day later, another guy, 30-year-old Justin Johnson, he saw the same thing, but this time he saw it while he was driving home, which is also pretty distracting. The light and the reflections also caught his eye. He says, at first I thought maybe it was a balloon, but the movements were too odd. In a world full of deepfakes, I mean, do we believe this account? Is this real? Lately everyone's talking about how these UFOs are spheres, so maybe this video is that of a sphere. not a cube. That's cool. I love teaching geometric shapes via alien aircraft. I'm like, this is a triangle. We saw this one in the Navy. Then we saw this cube in the sky. Number 9, Amityville photo. Okay, we'll go less UFOs, more ghosts. One M. Night Shyamalan theme to the other. Here we go. This photo was taken inside the actual Amityville house back in 1976. It's a young man, it appears, with glowing white eyes. How comforting is that? Pretty hard to miss there. He's got the glowing. Yep, looks very Sin City of him, just to stare with those white eyes. Now, at first, I thought this was from a horror movie, right? All those Amityville knockoffs. It looks obviously fake or set up in some way, until you start to read about the details here. See, this photo, it was taken with automatic cameras equipped with infrared, not an actual person. So, this young lad here probably wasn't expecting a selfie. Why he wasn't smiling or throwing up a peace sign. Makes sense now. Photographer Gene Campbell set up the photo and took it back in 1976. Now, at the time, Gene was working with paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren on the actual case. I'm scared now. This photo was revealed 3 years after it was taken on the Merv Griffin show, and many believe this is the ghost of John DeFeo, one of the victims in 1974. Now, you can't really do this anymore, right? You can't whip out photos from a otherwise crime scene and be like, okay gang, what do we think? Spirit or not a spirit? Vote? Yes? No? Obviously there was backlash after this for obvious reasons, but it took 3 years for that photo to reach the public eye, and now everybody believes in ghosts, or they do a little more than they did before that show. This was long before the Conjuring movie as well, obviously, so this was quite random to see on TV. Do you believe in ghosts? What's the ratio here? Comment down below. I'm not a believer, I'm not gonna lie. I've tried numerous times. I got the Ouija board, did the whole thing. Felt nothing, man. Like an 18-year-old on Christmas. I'm like, is that it? Is it done? Do I have to feel anything anymore? Number 8, Alfred Hitchcock and the MGM Lion. All right, you're gonna hear me roar after this one. This photo was from 1958. You've seen this at some point, right? Hopefully, or else, you know, we'll send over a VHS, we'll help you out. It was taken by Clarence Sinclair Bull. Now, the photo appears to be, well, no, it doesn't appear to be at all. It's Alfred Hitchcock serving tea to a lion. Yeah, the famous MGM lion. His name's Leo. That's him. There he goes. He's getting tea. He loves suspense and tea. Who would have thought? And company, it appears. North by Northwest was the only film that Hitchcock did with MGM. So there's a rumor now that he directed The Lion's Roar for the MGM intro, which is fun. But you're also like, okay, that's a real animal. That's sad. And also, that's probably nonsense. There have been 7 MGM lions in total. Yeah, not just one. But Leo was known to be the most friendly. I want to hear about the other 6. I'm like, what happened there? He's still in the logo today, but again, back in the 1950s, it's hard to say what it was really like on set. I mean, it's still a lion being held down for a photo, so probably wasn't a friendly vibe for that fella. Number 7, Gloria Steinem. Oh, here we go, a scandalous one. Back in 1963, the Playboy Club in New York City was booming. It was one of Hugh Hefner's greatest accomplishments at the time. This club was the talk of the town. That is until Gloria Steinem came in and started reporting some stuff. Gloria was a feminist writer. She's an icon. She created Miss Magazine back in 1972, but her career began much earlier, around the 60s. See, she got a job as one of these Playboy bunnies, you know, must be a comfortable getup. And she worked at the club undercover, secretly taking note on how this key holders only establishment was operating, right? Cool, what's going on here? What's the big scoop here? The staff were these young women, these beautiful young women, these bunnies. They had to wear the black bodysuits, the puffy white tails, the whole getup. And at age 28, Gloria worked undercover there for 3 weeks straight. And the piece she released after, appropriately titled A Bunny's Tale, great title, by the way, she nailed that one. It got so much attention that it kickstarted her freelance career and also made her a feminist icon. This photo of Gloria undercover shows you the comfortable work outfits she had to endure just to get the story out. Yeah, doesn't look like she had her non-slips on there. That's a write-up in my books. In a collection of her writings, Gloria reflects on the undercover piece, saying that it now has outlived all of the Playboy clubs, both here and abroad. That was before Hefner passed away in 2017, so I will add that you also outlived him as well. Good, he wasn't a very nice lad. Let's move on. Number 6, North Sentinel Island. All right, we got some people, some aliens, some ghosts. What else do we need, Taylor? How about some weird islands? Sure. North Sentinel Island. We gotta head over to India for this one. This island is the home of the Sentinelese tribe. You've probably heard about this at some point. One of the most forbidden islands in the world. But why? Located in the Bay of Bengal, North Sentinel Island is about 1,200 kilometers away from India. And while most islands are shrinking, this one actually grew back in 2014. Yeah, the universe is like, more. Yeah, you need more of this, sure. The island lifted up a couple meters during an earthquake so the west and south sides, they gained an extra kilometer. Nice. DLC unlocked. The inhabitants on this island are among the few uncontacted tribes left in the world. They have apparently been there for 50,000 years, and there's no sign of agriculture or even fire. Yet somehow this tribe has thrived for ages. Now, if we try and get close, they will try and drive anybody away. More than fair. Like, we have enough room. We're good. Let's just leave. In fact, back in 2006, 2 fishermen sadly lost their lives because they got too close to the island without knowing who was on it or what the island was. Yeah, you can't just approach random islands. You gotta do some homework. That's why I'm here. Number 5, Lascaux Cave. If you didn't visit this cave back in 1963 or sooner, well, you lost your chance because, well, humans ruin everything. Now we can't even see ancient art anymore because, well, it's too many of us. The Lascaux cave system is now a World Heritage Site in France, but once it was a booming tourist attraction. These cave paintings, see, they're 17,300 years old. They're quite ancient. We can't really touch them. You can't have someone write Steve was here on it. Can't do that. Paintings that depict cattle, bison, stags, you name it. They're beautiful. They're complex, and of course, like I said, they're extremely old. So old, in fact, that the cave was closed to the public forever in 1963 after it declared human presence wasn't healthy for the art. Yeah, our dirty coffee breath would eventually cause this art to fade away, so we had to hold our breath. We gotta leave. We gotta close it off. There we go. Plus, I'm sure somebody would have snuck in with a Sharpie by now and ruined it. You know what I mean? Or like graffiti. It would have been gone by now. You know it. 7,000-year-old paintings. Yeah, protect these for another 17,000 years, please. Number 4, Surtsey Island. Another fun island. Another weird story. Here we go. When it comes to new things in life, it's pretty rare that we get a new island, right? Especially on our planet when we're losing things and melting. How lucky are we? Sure. We're even luckier that Disney didn't build a resort here first, because now scientists, now they get a chance to study what an island looks like without human interaction. That's a fun little project to focus on in the future. That's cool. It's pretty cool. It's weird and scary, but it's cool, I guess. Yeah, I'm kind of nervous. I don't know. Surtsey Island in Iceland, as of right now, it's only open to a few scientists and geologists. Everybody else, beat it. Go find your own island. Get out of here. It was born from a volcanic eruption back in 1963, and scientists, they have one rule on this island. Don't talk about Fight Club. And the second rule is no seeds. Yeah, no life, no chance at life at all. Choose something else, anything else, please. One guy accidentally pooped out a tomato seed and he almost ruined the whole operation. Guy almost ruined this entire plan. What a stressful job. It's so eerie to see the oldest human history and then immediately after see a new island where humans are forbidden. It's like, we're not allowed to go and be places anymore. I'm kind of, that's not great. What are we doing here? I'm just breathing on things? I can't take a shit on this island? Number 3, Spaceman. Look, we've all been photobombed before. It's a blessing in disguise. You look back at prom photos, some dude's trying to do a moonwalk in between, his face is like melting this way. It's great. You're like, ah, classic Jeff. It's the best. But when Jim Templeton took a photo of his daughter in a otherwise empty marsh long before Photoshop existed, and yet somehow there appears to be an astronaut in the background, well, that's not very fun, is it? That's a little bit concerning. Jim assures us that nobody was around when this photo was taken, which I of course believe, because why would you put your kid in a photo with whatever that is? That's no thank you. It's not a weird, we're not gonna go and talk to that guy. Also, the fact that this man looks like he's from space, that ought to do it. That makes him more weird and believable. What are we looking at right now? I have no idea. Kodak even got involved in the story, like Kodak. Not Kodak Black, like the company. They got involved. They confirmed this photo was not tampered with. Yeah, and that's Kodak, right? They don't lie about anything. Spider-Man leak, Kodak's like, nah, it's Andrew Garfield. Don't listen to that. So authentic. Can confirm. Number 2, nursing home spirit. This photo was taken from a nursing home resident the same night that another resident had passed away, which is an odd thing to do. Just set up a camera thing right after, like, just in case, maybe we'll catch one. Well, they did. This was back in 2015, and that night they heard a door open and close, but there were no visitors allowed at the time. So, some Kodak was coming into the picture at this point. So now there's a great amount of people who think that this image is one of two things. It's either the spirit of the resident that passed away, or it's the Grim Reaper. Yeah, the door opening and closing. People think that was the Grim Reaper coming in and then leaving, which is so scary. How long was he in there? Was it like 46 seconds, 4 minutes? How long does this guy operate? Is he quick? Is it like bussing tables? Is he just like, all right, let's do this? Is he like Santa Claus? I feel like he's like Santa Claus. A few comments were also saying that it's comforting, this photo, to know that in the end you aren't alone, and that you have someone assisting you to the Afterlife? No, I'm good. I'd rather die alone than have whatever that is break into my home and closing open doors. I'm good. And finally, number 1, the Battle of Los Angeles, or lack thereof. We'll see. I don't know. This is a weird one. Of course, we have to end on one of the most unspeakable battles, photos, whatever you want to call it, of all time. The Battle of Los Angeles, otherwise known as the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, happened during World War II, right at the end of February 1942. Now, this event, first of all, took place only a few months after the Pearl Harbor attack, so I'll admit everyone's a little on edge. We're a little stressed out, we've got some hands hovering over some buttons, we're a little nervous. Sure, something like 25 enemy aircraft was apparently spotted flying over Los Angeles in the late hours of February 24th. So air raids then went off, blackouts were put in effect. This was not a drill, right? Or was it? What was this? This thing was getting lit up in the sky. Around 1,400 shells were blasted off and 2 people had a heart attack. That's how loud it was. In total, 5 people ended up dying from this retaliation, and apparently it was a false alarm. Although many now believe that it was UFOs or aliens, and that's why we were launching stuff at it. A press conference was held by the Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, and he called the incident war nerves. People have heart attacks. He's like, oops, I was nervous, my bad, slipped. Little quick reaction there.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens is a stratovolcano located in Skamania County, Washington. This volcano is best known for its huge and disastrous eruption on May 18th, 1980. This photograph comes from photographer Robert Landsberg, who of course was in the area at the time of the eruption. Before the eruption, he had visited the area in order to photograph and document all of the changes that were happening. On May 18th, he was within a few miles of the volcano when it erupted. Since he unfortunately was located so close to the explosion, he knew he would be unable to escape this disaster, so instead of focusing on the impossible, he focused on taking as many pictures as possible. Robert was obviously incredibly brave and dedicated, but also very smart. After snapping as many photos as he could, including this one, he then secured his camera in his backpack and covered his backpack with his body. He knew he was unlikely to survive, but wanted to make sure that these photos did. His body was found 17 days later with his backpack still underneath him. His film was of course developed and has provided geologists with some really valuable insights with his close documentation of the eruption. In our number 9 spot today, we have the core. This photo shows a physicist named Harold Agnew, and while this looks like a relatively normal, non-threatening photo, what he has in his hand is truly devastating. Harold is holding the nuclear core of what was nicknamed the Fat Man atomic bomb. This means that Harold is holding the nuclear core of the atomic bomb that was later dropped on Nagasaki in 1945. The immediate blast, of course, took many lives, but so did the long-term effects of the bomb, like radiation illness and that sort of thing. It's crazy to look at a photo like this because it seems just so perfectly normal when he literally has a life-changing, world-ending device in the palm of his hand. Also, I don't think I could ever hold something like that. Not only would I just not want to, but I would just be so afraid that something was gonna go wrong. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Challenger crew. This is a photo that was taken of the clearly very excited Challenger crew as they walked down the ramp ready to head off on their mission. The crew even included 37-year-old Krista McAuliffe, who was a high school social studies teacher. She had won a spot on this mission through a program with NASA called the Teacher in Space program, and she had trained diligently for months in order to be the first non-military person in space. On January 28, 1986, the Challenger mission proved to be fatal just 73 seconds after liftoff. 2 rubber O-rings failed because of the cold temperatures of the morning, and on live television, the world watched as the spacecraft broke apart and plunged into the ocean, sadly taking the lives of everyone on board. It is an absolutely tragic event made even more chilling by this final photo. In our number 7 spot today, we have the plague. This photo comes from the 19th century, from the 3rd plague pandemic. This was the first time that the plague had spread to all 5 continents. While we now know something about what that might have been like, what we haven't had to endure are the doctors that dressed like this. This is a photo of the outfits and masks that plague doctors wore when they would come to your house to treat or diagnose you. The long beak-like noses of the masks are very creepy, but they were used to hold herbs and other nicely scented things because they believed that it would help ward off the bad air, which at the time is what they thought was causing the sickness. A pandemic certainly is bad enough, Thankfully our doctors and nurses are just sticking to scrubs. In our number 6 spot today we have the elephant's foot. This photo looks like it's just a big lump of nothing, but it's called an elephant's foot. Don't worry, at first I was a little worried too, but it has nothing to do with elephants and is only named that because of its appearance. This lump was actually created from the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown, and it is just a mass of corium and other materials that were in the core of the reactor. This elephant's foot was located in the steam distribution corridor, which is under what's left of the reactor. While this mass doesn't produce as much radiation as it did before, it does still, to this day, produce a deadly amount. It is said that if you stood in front of it for just 300 seconds, that would be enough to get a lethal dose of radiation. It's kind of crazy that even though they knew this, they were still standing there taking pictures of it. But I'm just glad because we all now get to see it, and it gives us just a little more insight into what exactly happened that day. In our number 5 spot today we have Mount Pinatubo. This is a photo that is showing Mount Pinatubo, which is located in the Philippines, on June 15th, 1991. That is the day that this volcano erupted into what would be the second largest volcanic eruption of the 20th century. Certainly impressive, also extremely terrifying. This photo shows the pyroclastic flow full of hot gas and rock being flung into the air. Eruptive activity in the volcano first started on April 2nd of that year, which prompted researchers to set up seismographs in the area. By June, the volcano was having a group of progressively shallower eruptions before, on June 12th, the volcano had its first spectacular eruption, which sent an ash column 19 kilometers up into the atmosphere. After more highly gas-charged magma reached the surface on June 15th, the volcano once again exploded, this time sending the cloud of ash 40 kilometers up into the atmosphere. Volcanic ash and pumice blanketed the surrounding area, and pyroclastic flows filled what were once deep valleys with fresh volcanic deposits. It was truly magnificent and extremely powerful, and this photo shows just that. In our number 4 spot today we have the Pioneer's Defense. This photo is known as the Pioneer's Defense, and man does it ever look creepy. This photo comes from 1937 and it was taken by a Russian photographer named Viktor Bulla. This photo takes place in the Leningrad area, which is now known as St. Petersburg, which is the second largest city in Russia. The people in this photo were part of a group that was the 1930s Russian equivalent of our Boy Scouts, and it was called the Young Pioneers. The masks on their faces leave a very eerie feeling, and for a fair reason. These people were doing a military preparation drill, which is the reason for the gas mask. This photo was taken during a time where the country was under the dictatorship of Joseph Stalin, and the residents were constantly unsure of what was going to happen. The country was already seeing death, and people were already frightened just a few years before the start of World War II. In our number 3 spot today we have the lipstick. This is a photo that comes to us from December 10th, 1945. If looking at this image gives you a shudder down your spine, that absolutely makes sense, as it was written by a terrible person known as the Lipstick Killer. This photo is an image of a note he left written on the wall at one of his crime scenes. The photo comes from the apartment of Frances Brown, as just before he wrote this message, he took her life. After this message was left, he ended up taking the life of one other person before he was finally caught by police 6 months later. The message scrawled in the photo reads, quote, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." It is an absolutely chilling note with a horrifying backstory. In our number 2 spot today we have the acid drum. This photo comes to us from inside the house of another terrible person, the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, made very famous recently. This photo was taken from the inside of his home after he was found out and caught by authorities. Before his arrest, he was sadly able to take the lives of 17 different people. Although this photo might look kind of plain, the horrors are plentiful. This shot shows a drum full of acid that was located inside of his home. Probably don't really need to tell you what it was used for. I can't imagine the horrors investigators saw when they entered his home, and even previous to that as they investigated his crimes. Thankfully, Jeffrey was caught, and in 1992 he was sentenced to life in prison, but just 2 years later he was killed by a fellow prison inmate. In our number 1 spot today we have the Dyatlov Pass incident. If you have never heard of the Dyatlov Pass incident, you better buckle in because it is so terrifying. This photo was taken in February of 1959 as 9 young Soviet hikers sent out to trek through the Ural Mountains. They had set up a camp, and sometime during the night, something happened that made them cut their way out of the tent and all flee the site. Leaving in such a rush, they they were of course underdressed for the bitterly cold weather, and 6 of them ended up passing away from hypothermia, which is extremely tragic. The other 3, however, is where this story takes an even more frightening turn. Like I mentioned before, no one knows why they fled the tent in the first place, and the last 3 hikers were found passed away with severe signs of physical trauma that no one agreed on what had caused it. In 2019, the investigation was reopened, and just last year there was a conclusion that a kind of avalanche called a slab avalanche was the cause for these injuries. Before you come at me in the comments, I know that not everyone is convinced that's what happened, and I don't blame you. It's really strange. So, down below in the comments, let me know what you think. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the burst of joy. You might be looking at this photo wondering how this extremely joyous photo could hold any dark secrets. Well, this photo won a Pulitzer Prize, and for a very good reason. The photo was captured by Slava Vedder on March 17, 1973, at the Travis Air Force Base in California. The photo shows United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Robert L. Sturm and his family. This was taken as he was being reunited with his family after 5 years of being held as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam. On October 27, 1967, he was leading a flight of F-105s when he was shot down over Hanoi and held captive until March 14, 1973. I can't imagine what this must have been like for his family, because there was a chance that he could have not come home at all. The girl with her arms wide open is his daughter, but the looks on all of their faces truly captures the pure joy that they are all feeling. In our number 9 spot today, we have the reflecting pool. This is one of the creepiest or chilling images ever taken. It depicts a young girl in a graveyard who is looking down at her reflection in a pond. Okay, maybe a little eerie, but not exactly chilling. What really makes this photo what it is, however, is that there are seemingly 2 reflections looking back up at the little girl. No one knows who the girl is, where she is, or when this photo was taken, but it is estimated to have come from somewhere around the early 1900s. The photo was analyzed, and it has been said that it is unaltered or edited. Who knows how this photo was possible? Maybe there was some sort of invisible entity standing beside her that we could only see in the reflection, like a reverse vampire or something. In our number 8 spot today, we have the neighborhood nuclear test. This photo shows a mother and her young son looking out the window and witnessing a nuclear test explosion from the comfort of their own home in 1953. Like, what? Imagine seeing that from your window now in 2023. People would be going wild. And of course, any kind of nuclear test should be done as far away from where people live as possible. I know it's not like the test was being done in their front yard or anything, but I still certainly wouldn't be comfortable with them testing a nuclear device anywhere near the place I live. This photo was of course taken before the effects of nuclear radiation from these kinds of explosions were publicly understood. Actually, people have suggested that the public knowledge of these kinds of side effects were suppressed during this time in order to avoid controversy about them testing these kinds of weapons in your neighborhood. Well, that would of course be something insane to witness firsthand. Thankfully, the now widely known health risks associated with this sort of thing has caused this to not be a common occurrence anymore. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Boston Marathon. This photo comes to us from 1967, and it depicts the struggles that Catherine Switzer went through in order to be the first female to finish the Boston Marathon. The photo shows race organizers as well as other participants trying to stop her from running the marathon that she had trained for and was more than capable of completing. She has written a book that explains in great detail all of the things she went through that day and how the critiques and opinions about a woman running the race started even before she had registered to run. People in our history like Catherine are very important, as well as photos like these, because they show when people were literally trying to drag her down, she just kept on running. In our number 6 spot today, we have the reenactment. This photo is extremely unsettling, and for a very good reason. If, when you look at this photo, your instincts tell you that the guy in them is creepy, ding ding ding, you're right. This is a photo that features the German serial killer Joachim Kroll. He is known for taking the lives of 14 people, all varying in age, and he is also known for consuming parts of their flesh. This monster was caught in 1976, and he was discovered when police found out that he had been clogging the plumbing in his apartment with the remains of one of his victims. How gruesome is that? This photo was taken shortly after he was caught and arrested, and what you're seeing is Kroll reenacting one of his crimes for the police. I get goosebumps just thinking about that. I couldn't couldn't imagine being there or being the police officer that he's on top of. Talk about terrifying. I'm just glad that they caught him and got him off the street. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Stanley Hotel. This is a photo of the Stanley Hotel, which is the hotel that inspired the famous Stephen King novel, The Shining. This hotel was under construction in the early 1900s and saw a fateful day in 1911. There was an unexplained explosion that happened in room 217. In the explosion, a chambermaid was seriously injured, but she did end up surviving and she actually returned to work. A few years later, she passed away, and ever since her passing, there have been tons of guests who swear that they saw her ghost. Guests have said that they have seen her around the halls of the hotel, but the place that gets the most paranormal activity is, of course, room 217. This is the room where Stephen King and his wife stayed for one terrifying night in 1974. Apparently, they were actually the only guests at the hotel for this night, which at any other hotel might be kinda cool, but I feel like this is not what you want from a haunted hotel. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Rothschild Surrealist Ball. The Rothschild family is one of the wealthiest and most powerful families there has ever been. For years and years, there have been many rumors swirling about just how powerful and influential they really are, and there are some pretty crazy theories out there. In 1972, the family held a surrealist ball, which is where this photo comes from. These photos could potentially be very innocent, but there is just something about these very elaborate masks, coupled with the theories about what this family is really up to, that just makes it feel very eerie. I know it's kind of like conspiracy feeling, but I don't know, there's something very haunting about this. This party is one of the most legendary there has ever been, and whether or not they really are involved in shady dealings, that still is pretty impressive. In our number 3 spot today, we have John Lennon. Of course, we all know John Lennon as one part of the Beatles who went on after they disbanded to have a very successful solo career. Lennon was not only a musician, but he was also a peace activist who was strongly anti-war. He was not afraid to display his activism and held a 2-week anti-war demonstration. There was a period of 3 years where the Nixon administration was trying to have him deported for his criticism against the Vietnam War. That's how active he was. On December 8th, 1980, Lennon was leaving the Dakota apartment complex when he was stopped by a man named Mark David Chapman. Lennon signed an autograph for Mark, which is what is happening in this photo, and then Lennon went on his way. Little did he know, Mark was going to shoot him later that night. Once Lennon returned to the apartment complex, Mark was there waiting for him to commit his crime. Mark has said he did it mostly for attention, which is very horrifying, but Mark is also a very religious man who explained that Lennon once saying that the Beatles were more famous than Jesus is what really pushed him to commit this crime. It is very crazy that this photo was captured when Lennon was being so kind to who he thought was a fan, and no one would have ever predicted what would happen just a few hours later. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Hindenburg. This is a photo that was taken during what is now known as the Hindenburg disaster. It is commonly known that blimps, or these kinds of floating airships, use helium in them to float through the air, and it's important to note that helium isn't the choice because it's the only option, but rather because it's one of the safest options, and that is due to the fact that it isn't extremely volatile. Because of a US ban on the exportation of helium at the time, i.e. the Helium Control Act of 1925, although the Hindenburg was designed to use helium, there was a lack of it available, so on the day of the Hindenburg disaster, the much more flammable hydrogen was used instead, and this led to, well, complete disaster. When the Hindenburg floated off on May 6, 1937, it disastrously caught fire during its flight, with 97 people on board. Sadly, due to the fire, there were 35 casualties on board the flight that day. It is an absolutely horrendous situation, which teaches us all a very valuable lesson. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Mount Pinatubo. This is a photo that is showing Mount Pinatubo, which is located in the Philippines, on June 15, 1991. That is the day that this volcano erupted into what would be the second largest volcanic eruption of the 20th century. Certainly impressive, also extremely terrifying. This photo shows the pyroclastic flow full of hot gas and rock being flung into the air. Eruptive activity at the volcano first started on April 2nd of that year, which prompted researchers to set up seismographs in the area. By June, the volcano was having a couple of progressively shallower eruptions before, on June 12th, the volcano had its first first spectacular eruption, which sent an ash column 19 kilometers up into the atmosphere. Additionally, smaller explosions continued on June 13th, which then led to some intense seismic activity. After more highly gas-charged magma reached the surface, on June 15th the volcano once again exploded, this time sending the cloud of ash 40 kilometers up into the atmosphere. Volcanic ash and pumice blanketed the surrounding areas, and pyroclastic flows filled what were once deep valleys with fresh volcanic deposits. It was truly magnificent and extremely powerful, and this photo shows just that.
Kicking off our list at number 10. Floating hand. Okay, this one is so scary. Kill those lights. Let's dive into it, right? This photo is from over 100 years ago. Now this time, the photographer may or may not have caught a floating spirit hand in their photo. Yeah, I'll show you the photo. Let me know if you see it at first, right? Take a glance. What's wrong with this photo? Anything sticking out? Any floating hands just appearing in the photo? This photo is a group of women who worked in a linen factory. The lady on the far right appears to have an extra hand resting on her shoulder. Yeah, her right, our left. This may be a hidden person, maybe somebody with long arms was out of frame. I'm a lanky guy myself. I can put my arms around like 9 of my friends in a photo, I get it. But it's the positioning of the hand that gives me the chills, right? It looks curled almost, which gives it a demonic, insidious, the last key vibes. You know what I'm saying? Number 9. Colossal squid. Not to be confused with the giant squid, those are similar, but dare I say, smaller. As its name hint towards, the colossal squid is huge. It's one of the biggest things I've ever seen in my entire life. They live in the darkest, coldest depths surrounding the waters of Antarctica. These squid are on average 46 feet in length, with the females being the largest of the species. They have large tentacles with suckers equipped with razor hooks, so whatever it grabs, it's certainly not letting go anytime soon. Its diet consists of large fish, and when I say large, I'm referring to a 7-foot long Patagonian toothfish. You know, not like a little goldfish. No, these are colossal. They need a colossal meal. They try and fight whales sometimes. Know what I mean? They have no regard for the size of others, and they're more often than not marked up, suggesting that they've been in a few deep sea tussles, right? Octopus wants to fight. It's my favorite IPA. That's the inspiration right there. On top of being magnificent, they're quite mysterious. Only 2 specimens have ever been collected, with the second being as recent as 2014. Do you believe this is the closest living thing to the Kraken? I don't know, I'm horrified of deep sea creatures, so this list is haunting in my way, okay? Number 8, Island of the Dolls, Mexico. I'm also not a fan of dolls on islands, so pretty haunting. This island is famous, of course, for having dolls or doll parts just spread about all over. Why, you ask? Well, let's talk about it. The islands surrounding this one are inhabited, but this one is said to be filled with demonic spirits, so no one's hanging out, no one's camping, I guess. Specifically, the spirit of a young girl who drowned there way back. Like Camp Crystal Lake, only creepier, dare I say. These dolls are hanging or nailed to the trees. Now the dolls have to come from somewhere, right? And they came from a local resident by the name of Julian Santa Barrera. He put all these doll parts up in order to try and ward away any demonic spirits, right? He's fighting back by nailing doll parts to a tree. I guess he's a hero. To this day, nobody dares to approach the island. They would much rather snap a photo from far away on their boat, which I totally agree with. That's probably a much better idea. If it didn't look haunted before, it definitely does now with the doll parts. I don't know. Great call, Julian. Could have used smudge sticks though? I don't know. Doll parts, that's a bit haunting. Number 7, nursing home spirit. Also, we're gonna throw in some ghosts in this list, so again, hope those lights are dimmed. This photo was taken from a nursing home resident the same night another resident had passed away, and they had no idea. This was back in 2015. That night, they heard a door open and close out in the hallway, but no visitors were allowed there at the time, so they noted it. It was, a little odd. So there's a great amount of people who thinks that this image here is one of 2 things. 1, the spirit of the resident that sadly passed away, or 2, it could be the Grim Reaper. Yeah, how scary is that? Both terrible options. A few comments were saying how it's comforting to know that in the end, you aren't alone and, an entity or something will walk you to the other side. I disagree. I think it's terrifying. I'd rather die alone than have this dude break into my home and then walk me to the afterlife. I don't want any Grim Reaper. Thank you. Check out this photo. What do you think? Is this real or is this fake? Comment down below. Number 6, magnificent alien. While the rest of the world was in panic mode, a new sea sponge was discovered in 2020. How fun is that? And by fun, I mean definitely an alien. This is terrifying. It was named Advena magnifica, which translates to magnificent alien. Yep, magnificent alien, they're gonna call it. This sponge literally gets its name because it looks like E.T. And to be fair, it does look like E.T., it's kind of cute. An ROV found this sample over 6,000 feet deep in the Pacific Ocean. This was never meant to be found, and we did it. They found it in what they call a forest of weird. Just an alien sponge sticking their E.T. heads out, hoping for some food to pass by. That's literally their entire life. They just sit there and wait in the darkness until some sort of dust just sticks on them, and they go, and they eat it, somehow. Cristiana Castella Branco, the researcher who found this deep sea squishy, explains the discovery in an NOAA interview saying, as all these organisms are intricately connected, by documenting and describing marine biodiversity, we are building a better understanding of life and the impact of humans on Earth, and in this case, in the ocean. End quote. For a guy like me who doesn't like the ocean or any of the creatures in it. That's terrifying. See ya. Number 5. The Shining Hotel Spirit. The Stanley Hotel in Colorado is now, of course, quite famous for its use in the Stanley Kubrick 1980 classic, The Shining. The lodge, being over 100 years old, has a pretty decent chance of being haunted in real life. So the spirit tours that happen there pack a punch for fans of the production and also fans for the paranormal. Jay Mossling was on one of these tours, so like any ghost expert would do, they snapped a few photos of random corners of the room. Gotta catch those ghosts with the flash, it's the only way. After the trip, he was going through said photos and he found this gem. It appears to be a spirit, a demon, a ghost, an apparition, something that's see-through and floating, so scary. It also has long black hair, it appears, so yeah, I don't know what's going on there. The room was of course empty at the time the photo was taken, and I do believe that. There's no way you could just snap random photos of people and be like, oh, I was looking for ghosts, sorry. No, that's illegal, you can't do that. Number 4. Deep sea pigs. All right, we'll bring it back up to some scary sea stuff. These guys are a genus of sea cucumber, but they have these little tube-like legs, which is why they look super weird and scary. Not that regular sea cucumbers look exceptionally normal, these ones look even weirder than that of regular ones, so gotta include them. They like to live on the seafloor, where they move through the sediment searching for their next meal. They eat, check this out, they eat by extracting tiny little particles of organic matter that's just fallen from the surface of the ocean. Yeah, they just wait around for scraps to, again, just land on them. How sad is that? It's kind of funny, but it's mostly sad. Sea pigs measure out to be 4 to 6 inches long. So yeah, I guess they're cute, sure, I guess they're small, so therefore cute. I'll admit it, they're okay to look at. And they live at a depth of somewhere between 1,200 to 5,000 meters deep, so I don't have to worry about any of these sea pigs grabbing my own little piggies, right? They're quite deep, so therefore out of sight, out of mind. They are small, but they're mighty. Their skin carries a natural poison, which can make them a horrible midnight snack for anyone involved. Also, when brought up closer to the surface, they literally disintegrate. So that's a scary fact to know about an animal. Number 3, underneath Thwaites Glacier. We've seen some fascinating stuff here on Bumblebee, specifically underwater creatures and haunting stuff from our past. We love exploring the depths, and this next one, I couldn't believe it's actually terrifying to look at. This is footage from the bottom of an Antarctic glacier. This glacier is the size of Florida. If it collapses, our sea levels could rise 10 feet, so it's a pretty big deal. So scientists were like, yeah, let's drill a hole through the middle of it and see what happens. Yeah, in 2019, researchers drilled 2,300 feet right through the middle of the Thwaites Glacier, and they dropped a robot with the camera down and they saw this. This is the first time we've seen the grounding zone of Thwaites Glacier. Lead scientist Brittany Schmidt says this project is a dream come true. And for me, it's a nightmare that I now have to look at. I don't want to watch this video ever again, but you should, it's pretty cool. Number 2. Tomb KV55. Classic, going back to Egypt for our Bumblebee fans. Located in the Valley of Kings in Egypt, Tomb 55, otherwise KV55, was discovered by Edward Arton back in 1907. And the reason we call this tomb by a number rather than a name is because, well, we don't know who or what exactly was inside. Even the walls inside of it, they aren't like other tombs, covered in ancient hieroglyphs or, art or anything nice. No, this time there's nothing here. The only hint that remains is one hieroglyph. And it's scary. It translates to, the evil one shall not live again. Even these massive stones were built in order to prevent anything from getting out of the tomb. Yeah, out of the tomb. Usually with ancient tombs in history, it's the opposite. Things are, prevented to get grave robbers to come in. This time they're like, no, we don't want anything getting out. That's kind of haunting. Many believe that it's Akhenaton because he got on the wrong foot with, the high priests over 17 years of ruling. He was convincing everybody that their art and religion was wrong, and the only god in existence was his sun god. So his own son, King Tut, succeeded him and luckily restored the previous religion back to normal. But yeah, maybe that's why this tomb is empty. Maybe they're like, you know what? We don't want history to remember you. You tried to out religion, so we're good. Number 1, house guest. I saved the best for last, and by that I mean this is the scariest thing I've ever seen. This video, yep, little surprise for you, there we go. This comes from a middle-aged man in Oxford, North Carolina. It was his day off of work and he was looking forward to just kicking back, relaxing, and instead he had to deal with this. Instead, the lights in his home started to flicker, and immediately after, the smoke detector started to go off. The lights were flickering all over the house, not just one room. The fridge light, the bathroom light, you name it. The water even started to run by itself. So something started to go wrong, apparently. And he filmed the happenings, but when he looked back in the footage, after fleeing his home on his only day off, he caught this peeking from the other room when looking back. Pretty terrifying, right? Yeah. Whether it's thalassophobia or ghosts, we're hoping one of these photographs gave you a little scare here today on Bumblebee.